Hello and welcome to episode 227 of The Dive Down, a Magic the Gathering podcast focused on the latest decks, trends, spikes, and doomwakes. For the casual spike, I think I just gave away the guests. My name is Shane, here in Denver, Colorado. With me on the line from Massachusetts, it's Devon O'Donnell, also known as Doomwake, if you're nasty.
Only if you're nasty, though.
Well, you're not. You're a nice boy.
We got the casual spike in here. What about the non-casual spike? See, the question is, which version of spike do we have today?
Yeah, is it just Spike? Is it aspiring spike?
I think today I'm the unofficial fourth host of the Dive Down, which makes Doom the official fifth host of the Dive Down.
How can you be four before I'm five? That makes no sense.
I was already named four many years ago.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, we do. We have Evart Moughton coming out of Texas to join us. Long time regular guest host. Been a little busy. Been a little out of the dive down loop, but we've got him back. Welcome, Spike. What's up, Evart?
Yeah, a lot is up. It is like this. It feels like every time I'm on the dive down, it's like the busiest week of my entire life, and this week is like no exception. And then I have a very, very action-packed couple of months ahead of me too.
Really? Well, I'm excited to talk about that. Yeah, I think we'll just devote a lot of time to talking about what you both have been up to. You've both been playing a lot of Magic, a lot of interesting things happening in Pioneer. I'm kind of interested to see what you have to say about Modern, Evart, because we've been so focused on Pioneer lately that I feel a little out of the loop of Modern, but I know you're still grinding away on your stream. But if y'all don't know, Aspiring Spike, regular, long time, mostly Modern streamer, joining us back on the pod. Evart, how's the stream been going?
Stream has been really good. I was also taking a little bit of a detour into Pioneer for the 2 weeks before this week, trying to get ready for Regional Championship Dallas, and then also the last chance qualifiers for Regional Championship Dallas. That went really well for me because I had Doomwake staying with my house, and that was awesome. And then I also happened to win my LCQ and qualify for the Modern Pro Tour, which is very exciting. Yeah,
Cinderella story.
Big spoilers. Yeah, it was absolutely Cinderella story.
No, it's beautiful. I can't wait to talk to you about that. That's an awesome experience. I guess I'll just give a quick overview what I think should happen this week. So we will start with a quote-unquote breakdown. We'll talk about your all experiences down in Texas the other week at the RC, grinding the LCQs, doing some side events, playing in the RC if you're Spike. I want to talk a little bit about what Pioneer kind of looks like after the RC. And Doom, I know you had an RCQ that you played with Rakdos Sack. Talk a little bit about that and talk a little bit about Modern. And then we can get into revisiting probably a little bit about the top hits from the first batch of Lord of the Rings spoilers that we did last week with Dave and Stan. And then I think there's a few cards that have been spoiled since we did our last episode that I want to get into as well. So hopefully we'll see how long we can actually get into some of these, because sometimes it takes 30 seconds, sometimes it takes 15 minutes to, I think, actually talk about some of these cards. So let's get through housekeeping really quickly. You all just, twiddle your thumbs for a bit as I talk about no new patrons, no new increased tiers, no new reviews this week. That was fast. So if you do want to support us on Patreon, if you want to throw some of your hard-earned cash our way, help keep us going, patreon.com/thedivedown. A bunch of different tiers to join at, gives you a bunch of different rewards. And if you want to support these two, they both stream on Twitch, twitch.tv/aspiringspike, twitch.tv/d00mwake. Subscribe to these people. They're better content creators than us. You should give them your hard-earned money as well. If you don't want to support us through Patreon, go to our store, thedivedown.com/store. Get yourself a hat, a fanny pack, a t-shirt, whatever you're into. Or if you play Magic Online, you want to use some Mana Traders subscription, you can use code THEDIVEDOWN2023, gets you 10% off your first 2 months. Our friends over at Barrister & Mann, longtime sponsors of the Dive Down, grooming products, shaving soaps, body soaps, all that good stuff, fragrances, thedivedown.com, M23, like Magic 23. And then our friends over at NRG Plus just give listeners 8% off. Again, we get no kickback from that. You just get 8% off. Dive 8. Okay, there's some fast housekeeping because y'all. So you were in Texas the other week at the RC.
I was, yeah.
Tell me all about this. And you were hanging out together. Let me live vicariously. Let me enjoy time spent with two old friends. How'd that look? What do you all do?
It was fun. I had a great time. I'm at finally get to meet Lucy.
I've barely even seen Lucy. That's your newer dog, right, Spike?
Yeah, she's our second dog. She's great. She loved Doomwake.
Oh.
And then Athena ended up sleeping in the guest room with Doomwake every single night too. They're very sad that he's gone. But it was an awesome weekend. I don't know, like obviously like playing Magic is cool and doing well is fun.
Sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes. But just I think the gathering and the dinners and hanging out is really what it's all about. And this was like easily like my most memorable weekend as far as like good hangs go. Like I got to meet a lot of people, hang out with a lot of people for the first time, and it was just the best. It was just the best ever, to be honest.
Oh, it's great. I mean, yeah, that's the good stuff, right? I remember even back at the Pioneer, I forget whether it was a GP, back when they had GPs. You know, when I think I first met you IRL when we were in Phoenix, hanging out with some of the Dive Down crew, getting some pizza and some drinks. That was a blast. How long were you down there, Doom?
I got there on, I got there on Thursday night, and then I left on Monday, so Thursday through Monday. It was an amazing time. I had so much fun.
Who else did you all see down there? Just a bunch of random names that we would all know, or just some old friends, some streamers?
Yeah, a lot of people like the first like Jarvis Yu ended up hanging out with us for a long time. Jesse Titty Pills, Amaz, who's also like a local to Dallas, and he's more of like a variety streamer, but he's hanging out with us too. Anor, Katashi, Todd Anderson. Just I feel like I'm forgetting some people too, but it was just like
so many people.
Yeah, it was sweet.
I feel like I wouldn't be invited to this hangout. I'd be like, Shane's just, these guys are just a tier lower than us at this
point.
No,
we definitely invite you, Shane.
Oh, I know.
Yeah.
We got to get the booster seat for Shane.
Yeah, maybe.
It makes me feel bad that we didn't get down because we were in Atlanta at the RC a while ago now at this point, and Dallas is close to me. I need to just come down to Dallas just to hang. I guess there's not another one of those till next year. So
yeah, I mean, you can always, if you're ever in Dallas, we're happy to have you, happy to hang.
Oh, thank you. So Devon, let's first talk about your game plan down at Dallas. I remember you saying the week before you left that you were just going to go see what happened at the LCQs, and we were watching your experience on Twitter, on your Discord, just kind of keeping tabs on what was going on. What were you playing, and how did things go?
Playing the LCQs on Friday because I was not qualified for the regional championships on Saturday. Ended up playing in 5 LCQs, including the very, very last one, which fired like, I don't even remember exactly. I think it fired like 5:30 or 6 p.m. at night. And then ended up unfortunately not qualifying. The very last one I lost in top 4. It was a pretty heartbreaker of a match. But it was a lot of fun. Like I said, I had a great time. It was wouldn't trade it for the worlds, but I played Boros Convoke in all the LCQs. I didn't switch it up.
No, all of them. Okay, yeah, you didn't pivot out. Like you said, you mentioned you might think about pivoting out, but it was just running pretty well for you and well enough to keep going. I
thought about it, but I don't know. It just I put so much time and effort into the Boros Convoke deck that I didn't want to just I didn't want to try something else, and I was still pretty confident in it, even though like it felt like the games that I was losing weren't necessarily like, they weren't blowout games. They were all pretty close. Maybe matchups that I didn't prepare as much for. So I still thought that the Boros deck was, good against the expected field.
Word. And so what did you do the rest of the event? So like Friday didn't work out. And so were you on site Saturday, Sunday, that kind of thing? Just hanging out or playing side events or?
They actually had 10Ks on both Saturday and Sunday.
Oh, yeah.
So I played the sealed 10K on Saturday. My pool was pretty awful. So I think I dropped it like 2-3 or whatever. And then played the 10K, which was Pioneer on Sunday. I played Rakdos mid-range, started off 5-0, and then lost the last 2 rounds, or lost round 6 and 7, and then there was one more round of Swiss, but we wanted to go get dinner instead. And if I played I could have like played the last round for min cash, but I would have missed dinner, and not going to do that. So I decided to go to dinner instead.
No. The social equity and experience of that is usually way better than playing another round of Magic. I found.
Yeah, that was the best dinner we went to. It was steakhouse, and they had this pineapple, this like grilled pineapple soaked in rum. It was so good.
It's like the cinnamon sugar on the outside. They actually
Yeah.
So what they would do is they basically put cinnamon sugar and they kind of roasted the cinnamon sugar on the outside, and they would bring out the pineapple. And once the first layer was gone, they would bring it back in, put more cinnamon sugar on, and then bring it back out.
No.
It was,
That sounds better than the meat.
Yeah, it was actually the best.
It really
thing there.
was, yeah.
Everyone was like really hyping it up, and I thought for sure they were exaggerating, but it didn't even being underhyped somehow. It was crazy.
That's always the best experience. It's like, you're looking forward to something, or people are looking forward to something. You're like, maybe it's better for that's like a local thing. Like they just like, and you're like, oh man, this is astounding. This is blowing my mind.
Yeah. So good.
What was your event like, Spike, at the RC?
So I was also playing the LCQs. I had spent a couple weeks trying to like brew and innovate and find an interesting angle on Pioneer. And
That's not like you at all.
yeah, not like me at all. Honestly, like I feel like I failed to do that, and I ended up picking Mono Green Devotion as the deck to play, a deck that I felt like got a big buff from Pulukronos, and a deck that like I was getting crushed by in testing, and I was also crushing with when I was testing it off stream. But what's kind of interesting is I think a lot of other players did innovate really well over the last couple of weeks and did find like really cool and interesting decks to play, which I think is exciting. And I'm sure we'll talk more about that later. But I stuck with the Green Machine, and I mean that deck is obviously like just like on one level it's just like very broken, but also on another level it was like very easy to predict that Rakdos Midrange would be the most popular deck in the format.
Yeah.
Which both like pushes aggro decks out of the metagame and also like is a good matchup for green, despite like what every Rakdos player in the world would go. Every Rakdos player goes when you tell them it's a bad matchup for green, goes, no, well, actually it's fine for Rakdos. It's fine. And like
Rakdos has no bad matchups.
Yeah, no bad matchups. And obviously you could win as Rakdos, but I think the data over all the regional championships proved it's like 65% for green against Rakdos, something like that.
Yeah, it was very convincing in my opinion. Like the data from across the aggregate, it was like mono green is a good Rakdos matchup, especially right now.
Yeah, and so it wasn't so complicated. I just like tried to I picked what I felt like was the best deck for the field. It definitely helped that mono green is like just like disgusting and broken, and if you know how to pilot it well, you're gonna crush your opponents a lot of the time. And I also like won most of my die rolls, and I got pretty lucky, and now I'm qualified for the Pro Tour. Yeah.
Okay, so you did the LCQ into the RC.
Yes, I did.
Okay, so you won the LCQ.
I did, yeah. It was really funny. I have a fun story. In like round 3 of the LCQ, I'm paired against Jessie Titty Pills, a friend of mine who we had dinner with. She's great. You should subscribe to her Patreon if you want good Pioneer content. It's like maybe after the Dive Down podcast, the #1 Patreon.
Yeah, we've mentioned Jessie so many times because we cover the NRG pretty heavily, and she's a big name on the NRG circuit. So yeah, Jessie's high quality content creator and a great player. Yeah,
absolutely. But so we got paired against each other in round 3, and so we sat down, and they're like saying that the LCQs are about to end. So we both sit down and we sign up for the last LCQ at the same time together, and then we just play as fast as possible. So whoever loses is able to get into the last LCQ. And I ended up winning the match, and Jessie barely, because we played really fast, Jessie barely has time to make it into the last LCQ, and then she wins her LCQ also. So it was really like one of those like fun tournament moments. I'm sure some people have had similar experiences at like RCQs and
all the time. Yeah. I'm always winning one, and then my friend wins the next one.
Yeah. Exactly.
No, that's sweet. That's a good story. So tell me a little bit about what mono green's looking like right now. I mean, like I know what it looks like, right? But how does it play any differently than it used to? Do you think Pulukronos is kind of the most recent key change? Does it like help shore up the Rakdos matchup because like the redundant bodies? Does it help shore up anything in the air because it has reach?
I actually think it's at its worst of the Rakdos matchup. It's obviously fine there, but it is just like a 3-mana creature that dies to the removal spells. But sure. it just gives you like 7 big dumb green things that you can play on turn 2 that just like stonewall the aggro matchups. And especially having reach, it's like so good against spirits, and the 4/5 reach is really good against Greasefangs and Angels. And this card also transforms into a 6-power lifelinker if you have 6 mana lying around, which you do a lot of times as Green Devotion, which helps you stabilize against the aggro decks, letting you gain life. There's even some like fun tricks you can do where you legend roll both your Pulukronoses to get a bunch of Hydra tokens, which is not something that like ever came up, but there's some extra utility there too. And so I'm a big believer in 3 copies of Pulukronos, where drawing that second copy lets you like get those tokens or flip one copy, play a second copy. It's also kind of fragile to removal, so second copy is not too bad.
So a question that we were tossing around on the Dive Down Discord, Mickey S, Turtle Power, he's, I'm sure regular on both your all streams. We were kind of saying, hey, is this now the time to have mono green run Skylasher again in the board? Because it did have weaknesses against spirits. It did have some weaknesses, I think, against, what else was it? That a couple of decks that seemed like they would just have some flyers. Is Skylasher time back? And we're like, well, what would you possibly take out of that wish board? So since you played a lot of this deck this past weekend, what would you say are your most used wishboard cards and your least used wishboard cards, and which ones would you consider on the bubble for people who are trying to experiment and brew and just think about how they might tweak their wishboard?
I actually do like the Skylasher idea. I want to say I was 2-1 against spirits on the weekend.
Oh, that's pretty strong.
But both times my spirits opponents could have won if they had played better. And so like the matchup is so bad for green for sure. As far as like Karn wish targets go, I think like one wish target that I played that I saw a lot of people not play, and one that I would have not won my LCQ with, and I would have lost I think 3 matches of the regional championship without.
So it was good.
Shadow Spear.
Spear, baby.
So many people don't play the Shadow Spear. There's some matchups where you board it in, where against Spirits is one of those matchups where like Old Growth Troll is like a particularly bad card to draw because it doesn't have flying and like they just can ignore it pretty easily. But also like being able to wish for it against like a Tarkared, being able to wish for it game 1 against Spirits, it just is a card that stabilizes you. It just stabilizes you. There's also like an extra trick against Lotus Field where you can get it with Karn, activate it, turn off Hexproof on Lotus Field, then besage you there. Lotus Field.
Hell yeah.
Is not something that comes up very often, but is like a really fun interaction. When it happens, you can tell all your friends about it.
That's why we play.
Yeah, I've been a long time proponent of like the Darksteel Citadel in the sideboard for Karn, and like there are definitely plenty of times you want it, but I do think if you're trying to fit a card like Skylasher in the board, I feel like your utility land is definitely one that can get cut.
There's a lot of people cutting statue now too.
Yeah, a lot of people cut statue. I played the statue. I didn't play Bitestone, Meekstone, and I didn't play Transmogrifying Wand.
Yeah, those seem like the two that are on the bubble for me, just like by looking at it, but I also just have not played enough with this deck recently to possibly speak intelligently to this.
Yeah, I think that those are the cards on the bubble. I think that like I would never leave home without Shadow Spear, Damping Sphere, Sky Sovereign,
Tormod's Crypt.
There's Pithing Needle. I actually weirdly think you could cut the combo pieces in. I think actually it's 2 cards: the Chain Veil and the Cauldron. One card I was talking to some green players about cutting that's like kind of seems wild is Haywire Might. Like
really? Like
yeah, I know it sounds weird. Like it sounds just
weird.
like ridiculous to cut it, but your Karn shuts off Parhelion being crude. I did not get Haywire. I got Haywire Might 1 time all weekend. I was able to kill a Crow in War with it, which was pretty good, but I think I was winning that game anyways, probably. But I don't know. I just feel like if you want to specifically play Skylasher, I would probably be cutting like Haywire Might, Darksteel Citadel Statue, or maybe Woodcaller Automaton if you want to play 4. I think Automaton's good in the mirror and like almost nowhere else.
Because this is just the kind of thing that I always think about when I'm, in the lab trying to think about my sideboarding stuff is like, what am I already fine against, right? Like, what am I already pretty strong? And is Haywire Might one of those cards where it just seems so good, but like, am I already potentially winning that matchup? Like you said, where it's like, I've got Karn out. Like, do I really need to be getting Haywire Might? And, I'm not, like I said, I'm not deeply experienced with this, but this is the kind of thought process where I'm like, what's the stuff that's turning my 55 into a 60 that I could be turning my 40 into a 50? Like if I've got a handful of Skylashers in the side or something like that.
Yeah, I don't know if there's necessarily one particular matchup where the Haywire Might shines. Like I guess you could argue maybe Blue-White for Lockdown, but Lockdown isn't that great against you anyways. Spike brought up a good point at Crow and War, but yeah, it's like you have to find those cards, and there's a lot of cards that aren't necessarily matchup specific, but more situation specific. And I think you have to ask yourself, like, how often am I getting into these situations for that card to come up? Like, cutting Mightstone and Weakstone makes you slightly weaker to Shieldred, but how often are you really losing to Shieldred against Rakdos anyways? So stuff like that.
Yeah. Well, in the end, I mean, do you think mono green is still like the deck that you would bring tomorrow, or is it this? What would you be playing at your next Pioneer RC?
He's not playing Pioneer.
Well, if you were forced to,
I'll probably go to Atlanta and play in it no matter what, even if I'm already queued for the next Pro Tour. Like, those big tournaments are so fun, and being qualified, I would hate to miss out. It's also like a World Championship qualifier, which is like, how often do you get to play those? Yeah. But I would maybe play the Crackling Drake deck. I at the very least would be playtesting it pretty heavily. I remember seeing Jim Davis play in Atlanta, and I was like, Jim, this deck is amazing. I love it. And then I meant to playtest it. I never got around to it. I was doing really well with green, and then it's just been kind of crushing over the weekend. And I think the deck just looks. Oh man, it looks just so juicy. I would love to play it.
It does look sick.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about this. Like, what is Pioneer looking like after the RC? And I kind of want to start with these new decks that are kind of being hyped up this week. We've got like Azorius Lotus Field. We've got Is It Drakes. We've got this like Archfiend combo thing. And I think Racksack has suddenly made its appearance, and like, hey, like, it did really well. It was like one of the top 2 or 3 kind of wide in terms of wide representation, but really good performance. Mm-hmm. I think people are paying attention to Racksack again. So let's talk about Is It Drakes right now. Like, what do you all know about this deck? Why is it suddenly kind of back? What is it doing differently than Arclight Phoenix? And why are people caring about this right now?
So I was going to play it on stream today, but I didn't quite get to it because I actually played a league with the Phoenix deck and it took a little bit too long. But I think specifically the reason to play something like this over Phoenix is you have a better ability to clock. So for example, Crackling Drake on its own is sometimes, 8, 9, or 10 power that can either be a 2-turn clock or a 1-turn clock. And the other nice thing is with Fable, you can just kind of one-shot them and just go like Splitter Twin, copy your Drake, attack you for a bunch.
Well, let's rewind just a little bit. What's this deck constructed like? I mean, I'm sure all the people out there are kind of immediately like, oh yeah, I know the 75 Is It Drakes.
Sure.
Like, what's going on here?
So we got, let me pull up the list. I think it's Fables, Drakes, and then just a bunch of Is It cards, like, cantrips, removal spells, stuff like that. Let me pull up the list.
So is this kind of like a modified Phoenix deck?
Kind of. I honestly think it's really different from Phoenix, where like Phoenix in some ways is kind of a pseudo combo deck where you're trying to assemble very specific pieces, where you're trying to get obviously your Phoenix is in the yard and you're trying to set up for this turn where you play your temporal, take an extra turn, down spell, temporal trespass, and you copy it, take 2 turns, win the game. It's kind of like this combo snowball-y mid-range deck, but like the Crackling Drake build is kind of removes, obviously you have the Fable copy Crackling Drake thing, but you're just like a pile of cheap interactive spells, Ledger Shredder, Fable, Crackling Drake, Treasure Cruise. You just totally outvalue your opponents. And because Crackling Drake has that clause where it still gets its power if your cards are exiled, you're just so much more resilient to any amount of graveyard hate, which is just such a big deal for a deck like this.
So have you been played against it or seen the discourse about it? Like, what do you think the real draw is? Like, what is it doing differently, or how is it attacking the metagame that's making it powerful? Like, it won a challenge this weekend, right? Is that what I heard?
I think it got, so the super qualifier, there was 2 in the top 8. If I'm looking at the challenge, there was the challenge on Saturday. It looks like there was also 2 in the top 8, and then 2 more in the top 32, and then 2 in the top 16 on Sunday. So a ton in top 8/top 32s. Yeah. But I think as far as like what its position in the metagame, I would have to imagine that this deck is, like Spike said, because it's less weak to graveyard hate. The traditional line of like Karn for Tormod's Crypt against Phoenix can be pretty backbreaking, but this deck, it doesn't care as much about Karn for Crypt because, again, you have Crackling Drake, which, as Spike said, kind of counts power from exiled cards as well, and you have kind of a better ability to one-shot. Like if you ever get to untap with a Flip Fable, you cast a Drake. Sometimes that's just lethal on the spot. So you have like a better ability to close out games faster. And a lot of what's going on here is similar to the rest of the core of the Phoenix deck: cantrips, removal spells. It's just going about winning the game in a slightly different fashion. And the fact that it's better against graveyard hate means that if people are over preparing for Greasefang, you're not catching that that same like splash 8 as well.
Sweet. So just kind of what plays out kind of like is it cantrip control deck, gaining value after Ledger Shredder, casting a Drake, refilling with Treasure Cruise, getting some Fable value, and just going to town?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah,
Seems great.
It's like a blue-red deck, but it's playing all good cards for once. You know what I mean? It's like
Sure.
it's like just so many blue-red hero decks in the format. I've definitely been guilty of this, trying to play 8 young pyromancers.
Are you saying that Arclay Phoenix is not a good card?
Phoenix is a good card, but like there's like a lot of cards in the Phoenix shell that are kind of lower card quality. Galvanic Iteration, Trespass can be clunky. They've been clogged in your hand. They can be picked apart by Rakdos. This deck just doesn't have that many weaknesses. The deck is just card advantage, great threats, cheap interaction, 4 Spell Pierce, all these 1 mana removal spells. Blitz of the Thunder Raptor is like a super clean answer to Shieldred. It's like the deck just has like very few weaknesses, and it also like it seems like pretty well positioned where you have like lots of flyers and cheap interaction against mono green. You have lots of like card advantage and like ways to go over the top of Rakdos, fight that matchup well, and you have lots of cheap interaction against like decks like Spirits and Blitz and stuff. And it just doesn't have many weaknesses, I think is how I'm thinking about it.
Yeah, it looks impressive. This is a deck I think Stan would really like, and I know Dave has played some of these Drake decks in the past, so you get those two guys, a pile of Izzet cards, they're going to be happy. Let's talk a little bit about this Fires of Victory card, which I think I've never seen really be cast. It's 1 in a red instant with kicker, 2 in a blue. If the spell was kicked, draw a card. Fires of Victory deals damage to target creature or planeswalker equal to the number of cards in your hand. That seems potentially conditional, but is it usually working out well for you?
I think it's basically, instead of the 4th copy of Blitz, just another, like you want 4 answers to Shieldred in your deck, and they kind of sort of occupy the same spot. Yeah, because Blitz, like if your graveyard is being attacked, Blitz, I believe, only counts graveyard, not exile. Yeah, Blitz only counts spells in the graveyard. So Fires is like kind of an answer to Shieldred that doesn't necessarily rely on the graveyard if it's being attacked like by a Trespasser.
Sure. And is it better than just 2 copies of Roast? Just because of the potential for flyers out there?
Instant speed is the most important part.
Hitting planeswalkers too against mono green is like so nice.
Yep. Sure, makes total sense. Yeah, the Izzet Drake deck by Leviathan 102. I don't know if it's anyone I should know. They went 9-0 in the Super Qualifier and ended up 2nd place. So congrats to them. Where did this deck come from? I keep hearing people call it like Zoomer Drakes. Is it like one of those popular Zoomer people, or is it just like it's called Zoomer Drakes because it's like the new build of Drakes or something like that?
Both people who top baited on the qualifier on Friday, Leviathan and Bullwinkle, they're both in the Zoomer Discord. So
yes, there's a Zoomer Discord. No wonder I haven't been invited.
I've been told. I haven't. Obviously, I'm not in there.
All right. Well, this sounds like a cool deck to check out if you're into that strategy. I mean, I remember playing like various Drake decks on like Historic or on Magic Arena, and those were cool.
Real quick aside on the blue-red deck, I don't know if I know we don't have this down here, but I don't know if Spike saw this. Did you see the Phoenix deck that top baited Athens that had 4 Demolich?
I saw a screenshot with 4 Demolich, and I was like, holy guacamole! And then I still haven't seen the list, but I want to see the list.
Sweet. Let's talk a little bit about Azorius Lotus Field, which is another deck that I think has been lurking and now is no longer lurking. It's just hanging out, standing there on the corner saying, I'm also a legitimate deck. Like, so much so that I know that I think Frank Karsten made a separate category for it when he was doing some metagame breakdown. And so, yeah, what is this just like a Lotus ramp Azorius control deck, or am I missing some more obvious things about this?
So the deck list, the one that I'm looking at, I don't know if this is exactly the one from the RC, but the idea here is Strict Proctor is a card that basically says the 1/3 flyer, whenever a permanent entering the battlefield causes a triggered ability to trigger, counter that ability unless its controller pays 2. So you can use this to your own benefit with Lotus Field. So if you play turn 3, you play Strict Proctor, then play Lotus Field, you can just choose not to pay and not sacrifice lands. So it's kind of a way for the blue-white control deck to kind of get this big mana boost. And then you're pairing Lotus Field with Thespian Stage, and then you're kind of utilizing that mana to play big stuff like Shark Typhoon, Teferi, but Memory Deluge, all that good normal blue-white stuff. And then it's also playing 4 Discontinuity to then Teferi untap 2 Lotus Fields. You have 6 mana to then Discontinuity on your opponent's turn. It's just like, and it just kind of snowballs from there.
Yeah, one more note about discontinuity. You can also use it as a way to ramp yourself in the deck because you can respond to Lotus Fields into the battlefield trigger and then just end your turn so you don't have to sacrifice 2 lands.
Sweet. So it just kind of has a few cheaty ways to get the Lotus Field out and then just take advantage of the massive mana boost that it provides. And it is mainly looking to control and then just win the endgame.
Yeah, it's like blue-white control that can actually have some nut draws, which is kind of exciting, where a lot of times you're playing blue-white control decks, it just feels like no matter how good your draw is, if your opponent draws better than you, you're just not able to contain them, control them. But this strict proctor stuff allows you to have access to turn 3 Teferis and untapping into 4 more mana. This is something I've played a lot of in Modern, and actually like one historic PT I played a bank control deck with Teferi and a couple copies of Lotus Field, where just that untapping of Lotus Field Teferi is such a powerful mana engine, and it just doesn't come at a very high cost to your deck, where Lotus Field is effectively just a land that enters tapped at like the very bare minimum with effectively very high upside. I also think it's kind of cool how Strict Proctor just does have lots of like small added utility in the metagame. It stops cards like Spell Queller and Cavalier, and it just like stops ETB effects, which is not the most relevant. You wouldn't be just main decking for without Lotus Field, but it is kind of cool that card is just fine to draw on its own.
Yeah, for sure. It's like a fine, cheap value creature. You can block with it to buy a turn or, take advantage of the ETB effect, nullification, like you said. Do you think that this deck is something that people should start preparing for? Like, I feel like, the cat's out of the bag now, and I think people who are into the style of deck might be playing it more often.
I don't know if it would. I mean, it's definitely going to be a player. I wouldn't necessarily say like a lot of the people who are playing blue-white control, they might not necessarily switch to this build, because I think the issue is if you're looking at the deck list, there's not as much of the cheap removal that you see. Like, there's no March of Otherworldly Light. Sometimes you see Portable Hole. Sometimes you see Fateful Absence. There's really none of that stuff in this deck. It's really trying to go over the top. And the one issue is, I think if people are over preparing for the Lotus Field combo deck and they're kind of jamming a bunch of Damping Spheres, you can maybe catch some Splash 8 there as well.
Yeah, it makes total sense. Yeah, it's a cool deck. I'm interested in it for sure. Not to play it myself, but just, it's cool when people are tuning things and tweaking things in this manner. Another deck I want to talk about in Doom, Devon, you definitely know a little bit about this one. This is like this Archfiend of the Dross deck. What's going on with this?
All right, so... and maybe Spike can touch on this as well. So there was a player by the name of CFT Sock. Their name is Ray Zhang. They typically play some really off-the-wall decks, and in the regional championship in Dallas last weekend, they played this new combo deck. And the combo is Archfiend of the Dross, which is a 6/6 flyer for 4. Some relevant text, but basically the relevant text here is at the beginning of your upkeep, remove an oil counter from it. If you can't, you lose the game. Metamorphic Alteration is a 2-mana enchantment that enchants any creature on the battlefield and makes enchanted creature a copy of any creature. So you make their creature into an Archfiend that has no oil counters on it. You say go, and they lose the game on their upkeep. And then they paired this with like kind of your typical Grixis/Rakdos Shell, Fable the Mirror Breaker, Corpse Appraiser, Thoughtseize, Fatal Push, all that kind of stuff. And then Dig Through Time as well. That's kind of like the blue splash. And that's basically what the deck looks like.
I'm seeing a genius inclusion here in Swan Song.
You like that one?
Genius or Grifter, I wonder.
You now have a creature that I can cast Metamorphic Alteration on.
Some people don't play creatures.
This is great. It's cheap, efficient, gets the job done.
And Spike actually played against this player in the RC. How'd that go?
I did. I got my teeth kicked in by Ray. It was brutal. Both games, Ray goes, push your elf, Thoughtseize, Fable, Archfiend, combo kill you. And it was rough. I think the deck looked very interesting and good. I agree with the thought that you're going to be pretty bad against decks without creatures. But I as far as like the Swan Song stuff goes, I don't think the songs help enough. I think you're mostly just want to like cut your enchantments post board and just become like a blue-black or Grixis control deck post board in those matchups would be.
Like I clearly said it was genius. Okay, so
yeah. I'm firmly in the Grifter camp on Swan Song. It's like, have you ever drawn and cast a Swan Song and then not like done your thing with it? Maybe it's okay. I'm not a believer at the moment at the time of making this comment.
And you, Doom, you played versus Todd Anderson on like a stream, like kind of like grudge match type thing with this, or was he playing this?
So it's funny because you can't actually. So listeners, please beware. Well, maybe by the time this episode goes out, they might have fixed the bug. But the card Metamorphic Alteration is currently bugged on Magic Online.
No.
So you can't actually. It just doesn't work. The card doesn't work. So what Todd and I did is we decided to play kind of like a gentleman's agreement, where I would play the deck, and whenever I cast the combo, he would just concede the game if he was dead to it. And you know, it went okay. I think we played against like 3 or 4 different decks. I think the Archwing deck won slightly less than half of its matches. So nothing, you know, and again, these are the early iterations. They're going to be a little bit rougher around the edges, but the shell definitely showed promise, you know.
Sweet. I mean, and Archfiend is like not a bad card, right? Like I think it's pretty darn strong. You get a 6/6 flyer and you have 4 turns to finish your opponent off, or 3 turns. 1, 2, 3, 4.
3.
Yeah. 3 turns because it doesn't really have haste. So, I mean, it's still pretty darn good. Like, if that's kind of uncontested in the air, you're going to be fine.
Yeah, I think that's one very exciting thing about the combo. Like, compared to Deceiver, Exarch, and Splinter Twin, like, neither of those cards are good to draw on their own. But Archfiend is, like, a genuinely good threat. Like, there are Rakdos mid-range players who do just play some number of the card as a good card. And this is always something to like really look out for, and is actually something we'll probably talk about when it comes to Modern and the Lord of the Rings spoilers. But when your good cards are also I win in combo pieces, that is a very, very exciting thing.
Yeah, I'm into it. And let's talk a little bit about Raxac. Why we're here. It's not as exciting as these newer decks, perhaps, but I think it's a deck that I have wanted to get good at. I've always kind of considered it one of those decks where when good people are playing it, it seems like it always has like a mid 50s to even like high 50s win rate, and in the right metagame, of course, as well. And I think Raxac is kind of in that position right now where, you know, it seems to have a pretty good matchup spread. It is strong against a lot of what's going on in the metagame. It is, of course, still weak, fairly weak to a number of combo decks that are out there. But I think that right now people are into it. And I'm curious. Well, first, I know, Devon, you made top 8 or top 4 in a Pio RCQ this past weekend, right? I think you said you lost to Spirits somehow. Just got through the wrong half of your deck.
Well, it's funny. I actually think about it now. I played the matchup like 1 or 2 more times after that. I actually don't think it's that great of a matchup for Sack, because sometimes like if you don't open on like exactly Thoughtseize Fatal Push and they go 1-drop into Curious Obsession and your hand is just like a bunch of Fables and Harvesters, you can't possibly win. Like you have the draw the wrong half problem. But yeah, Rakdos Sacrifice had a pretty absurd win rate. I think it was like 57-ish across I think it was at the Dallas. Maybe it was a little less than that at the Dallas RC.
Yeah, it was definitely high 50s across all 4 or 5.
And this past weekend on Magic Online, for those of you who may not know, Logan Nettles, aka Jabberwocky on Magic Online, lost the finals of the Pioneer Challenge on Saturday and won the Pioneer Challenge on Sunday. Both played Rakdos both times, and the only match he lost the entire weekend was the finals of the first challenge on Saturday. So, just absolutely crushed everybody in the 2 challenges.
I'm as good as Logan, so I can do this.
I think the deck is really good. The sketchy matchup is definitely mono green, but you have draws like if you have the Claim Oven stuff and you can kill their early elves. Basically the biggest part of that matchup is you have to get something on the battlefield before they play Karn, because you need to, like, the turn they play Karn, you have to kill it immediately because it shuts off your ovens and stuff. But as long as you can kind of manage that, I think the biggest addition too is a lot of people weren't playing Thoughtseize main deck before, and all of the recent lists now have 4 Thoughtseize main deck in addition to 4 Fatal Push, and I think that's a genius addition.
Play the good cards.
Yeah.
Don't get funny. Just play the good cards.
Helps the green matchup a lot too, because you can just Thoughtseize their Karn.
So when I look at this, then the type of thing that I notice is, one, we see that the Obnixilis creature is not in here. It didn't make the cut. It doesn't seem like that's pushing this.
Why are you laughing, Spike?
This deck over the edge.
I just been asked so many times about that card in Modern too, but also in Pioneer, and you can't play 4-mana creatures that like don't do anything. Well, you can play 4-mana creatures, but 4-mana creatures that don't do anything until your engine is already online. This is just like not a very good dynamic.
Yeah, I mean, it feels a little perhaps win more. That's kind of one of the fears we had when we were talking about it in the spoiler episodes. Is like, yeah, this card seems good, but like if you're already doing that thing, after casting your 4-drop, that probably could have just been something maybe cheaper or that got you there.
Yeah, there's one format where this card is very good. The format it was designed for, Commander.
So
Probably good in Standard.
but there is, I mean, we do have Obnixilis Adversary in the sideboard. Check my assumption here. Whenever I play this against controlling decks, I love it. Is there other things that you want to be bringing this in against, or is this like just strictly kind of help me against Azorius Control and other styles of decks like that?
It's pretty good against Burn. Like, not that that's a very common deck in Pioneer, but this card gains you a lot of life with the it gains you 4 life a turn. Totally buries the Burn decks, but not that deck is like almost present at all in Pioneer these days.
What's up with Furnace Reigns? Is that just kind of like to help you against stuff like Shieldred, other big creatures? Like, it's kind of expensive, 2 and a red, for just kind of to grab someone's big creature and maybe sacrifice it, get out of the way, or just hit them with it if that's like their only blocker.
You just want to take their Cav. It's take Cav, take Troll. Yeah. It's basically only for green. I mean, you could like maybe board in one against Rakdos, but I don't think I would. Yeah,
it's too easy for them to pick apart your like Sack Outlet plus Treachery effect with their discard spells. I don't think you really want it against them. That matchup is, at least by my impression, is already pretty good for Raksak anyways. Yeah. So I don't think you need like these Hail Marys in the matchup. Like Shieldred dies to Fatal Push too. It's and you're a really, really good Fatal Push as Raksak.
Yeah, this is the kind of deck that like I would hire one of you to tutor me. You know what I mean? Like, let's do some training. Let's teach Shane how to actually play, sacrifice decks, because when I see both of you play them, you're eking out. These are the decks that I really equate with you, Spike, because you've played so many decks with engines like this, and you just get max value out of them. And I know you do too, Devon. It's just the kind of thing that I remember. I've seen Spike do it so many different times and so many different decks. I'm like, how do I do this? Because when I play them, I'm just like punting left and right and making weird little random mistakes. I don't think you can afford to do that with these types of strategies. And so I think that's like, good players can be very good with them, but it's definitely something where I'm going to get punished unless I practice quite a bit. What's your number one pro tip for playing Raksak? You go first, Devon.
I mean, I guess do the math. I mean, there's just a lot of weird spots where you have to like think multiple turns in advance. I don't know. It's a lot of sequencing too. There's so many different things. I guess math is the most important thing.
My biggest advice is to take your time. Even if you're like very experienced with the deck, you just have to take your time. It's one of those decks. It's kind of like, I hate to even utter this deck's name, but it's kind of like Death and Taxes, where the slower you play, the better the deck is. Like, the longer you just look at the board, and you look at your hand, and you look at your opponent, and you look at the board, and you look at your hand, just the longer time you take, the better the cards are. I don't know, it's hard to describe. The longer you look at them, you look at them, they're not very good. You look at the board, you have no good plays, but eventually, if you wait long enough, you'll have good plays.
Okay.
You heard it here first. Spike has confirmed Rakdos is the same thing as Death and Taxes 2023. Quote it.
Unlucky Witness can become Shieldred if you wait long enough.
That's true. I mean, it's like specifically the card Flicker Wisp. I feel like if you look at Flicker Wisp, like immediately there's no good plays with
That's
it.
not in this deck.
I know, but that's the Taxes effect. You just have to stare at Flicker Wisp, and eventually the card does something.
Yeah, makes good sense. I'm hyped to get some time with it. Let's do a few minutes, Evart, on Modern. Anything cool going on in Modern? Anything I need to care about right now? Or can I just wait till next week? Like, what's interesting in Modern right now?
I don't know. I know I'm like the person to ask, but I don't know. So like the Modern metagame is very stagnant, I would say at this point, maybe. There's like 5 decks that are like very clearly metagame defining: Creativity, Murktide, Scam, Rhinos, Hammer. Although Hammer is like really bad, I think, of those decks.
Might be getting worse after this set.
Yeah,
or might be getting better. I don't know.
Yeah, potentially. Yeah, it's seemingly maybe on the decline. There are a few other fringe strategies that are viable. There's still like I think several decks that I like to play that I think have like an interesting edge, but it's definitely feels like one of those metagames where it is very, very difficult to brew and innovate in this environment where you have something that does just smash all of these top strategies. And obviously, this is something I'm working really hard on in preparation for the Pro Tour. Lord of the Rings, I think, is going to be above average shakeup for this dynamic, and I think that there's like a handful of cards that are like really interesting and exciting, but I don't know that we're going to see a new deck on top of it afterwards. So there's a lot of decks I'm really interested to playtest and work on. And this is also like a very odd dynamic for me too, where if I do feel like there's a broken deck, I'm not going to tell anybody about it. And I'm going to just like, my plan is to play like no more than 2 leagues with any given deck on stream during this Pro Tour testing process. Just to like, I can like, just to kind of conceal the information and like work and tune stuff off stream and try to break it and, you know, win the Pro Tour, help my team win the Pro Tour. So I don't know. It's weird. I've been thinking a lot about it, but it's also like when you have like Pro Tour brain is just so different from like,
tell me about it.
From different kinds of like modern preparation, or like, because like Pro Tours are like, you know, this is something that I think a lot of players who have maybe never played a Pro Tour, or even some that don't understand.
Never played a Pro Tour? I mean, come on, we've all been there, especially me,
especially Shane. But Pro Tours, of all the tournaments I've ever played, have been the easiest to metagame for by a lot. I think every single Pro Tour I've played, I've had like a really good read of the metagame, and I've played a deck that was like, had a good counter to that predicted metagame, and I've had like pretty good results at all of them. And it's just, and like with that being the case in Modern, I think that it feels like in a big way, this Modern Pro Tour is going to be like very predictable, the metagame, or like, like in the same way as a lot of Pro Tours are relatively predictable, and because of that, in theory, exploitable. And of course, it's not easy to exploit those top tier 1 decks, but it's also like, when you're playing leagues and even challenges, you run into a lot more random stuff, off-meta stuff you're not targeting. But when you have Pro Tour brain, you have a Pro Tour tournament to prep for, you like this. These are really the tournaments to try to like metagame and innovate for, in my opinion, because so many other players don't metagame and they don't innovate. They just try to pick a good deck and learn it.
Yeah. So let's take a quick break, and then we'll come back and we'll talk about some of these potential cards that might shake things up, might add some new components into Modern. And so stay with us. All right, we are back, and as I threatened, we've got the second batch of Lord of the Rings Tales of Middle-earth, I believe is the legally required subheader for that set. Something about what they had rights to from Lord of the Rings. I don't know.
Don't get us demonetized, Shane.
Yeah. Whew. Yeah, I mean, this is a podcast. We're already demonetized enough. So what we talked about early on, you know, we talked about some cards that like when they got spoiled a while ago, like the Lighted Halfling, the One Ring, and then last week we talked about some potential bangers like Stern Scolding, Forge Anew, Orcish Bowmasters, stuff like that. So before we get into new cards, I wanted to get your all take on anything that you're particularly interested in. We're looking at the same list. I imagine we're all in the notes here. What are the kind of things that you're hyped about? Like, is the Lighted Halfling as potentially broken as some people are saying, or is it just another mana dork that people are going to kind of not think about in like a few weeks?
Halfling's a fine card. I think like there's a good chance Yawgmoth ends up playing it over Birds and or Grazer and or Hierarch. I think it is mostly just a mana dork. You know, it's nice it doesn't die to Rin. It gives your Yawgmoths uncounterable, your Grist uncounterable, but it does not feel like a game-changing card to me. To me, and this is like not an opinion I've seen shared anywhere, but to me, I think the One Ring is the best card in the set by like a significant margin, and I'm like,
it's getting slept on for sure.
Yeah, I don't know. It's like there are a lot of cards that are like archetype upgrades. There are a lot of cards that are like interesting, like Halfling, like Sam, like Forge Anew, Stern Scolding. I don't know if you know this, Shane. I consulted on the Lord of the Rings set like 2 years ago. And the One Ring was completely different when I saw it, and I know that if I was giving feedback on it, I would be very interested in toning it down. Very specifically, I think that you should take the damage when you tap it, not on your upkeep. Like the fact that you're able to go play the One Ring, draw a card, then on your next turn lose 1 life, then draw 2. You've lost 1 life and you've drawn 3 cards, and then the next turn you lose 2 life. You take it a total of 3, then you draw 3 more cards.
Yeah, it's a lot of drawing.
Yeah, it's a lot of drawing, and so like if you're able to either like combo kill your opponent, before you die to your One Ring, or play a deck just with Omnath and gain enough life to where this life loss doesn't matter. Or, like, the fact that it's legendary too means that if you're dying to your One Ring, you could just play another One Ring, ending your protection from everything. And you also get to, like, tap and draw 4, play a different One Ring, never take the damage from those counters. Like, this card to me is the most exciting by a lot, and it is the most broken by a lot.
It's potentially dangerous, right?
Yeah, it is. I really think so, and I have like not felt this opinion shared basically at all. And so I'm also like, I don't know, I haven't like I'm gonna make a YouTube video about it. I'm gonna be doing some brewing. I'm talking to my team about it too. I am like really hyped for this card.
Yeah, I think we gave it a pretty fair shake during like the really early spoiler episode, because we're just like, yeah, it's not a lot of damage and it is a lot of card draw. So what kind of decks you think are going to be playing this? Like just Omnath decks, just like slower long game decks?
Yeah, I think Omnath, Tron. I have a combo deck that use that, like, this is so funny. I have a combo deck that I have like a pretty good win rate with. It's like plays Manifold Key, Voltaic Key, Everflowing Chalice, Astral Cornucopia, Core Tapper. It's like a charge counter deck. But the fact that it plays the keys is so funny because you get to just like untap your One Ring and draw tons of cards with the card too. I think it's like just such a weirdly perfect fit for that deck. And
Surge Note only puts charge counters. I thought it was anti-counter.
That'd be funny. Although you can peel the One Ring counters off of the One Ring with power
conduit, right? Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So like, there's a little bit of that added synergy there too.
I could even see like Blue Eye Control maybe playing this because you can reset it with the fairy.
Yeah. I think Blue Eye Control will be interested in playing it. I think there's like just a good chance that this is the best card advantage top end spell in Modern. And like, this is it's I could be wrong, and it could be one you have to play test with, but like what's also like crazy is that it stabilizes really hard. It draws you a card. It draws you like basically 3 cards immediately, and it gives you protection from everything, and it's indestructible. So it's difficult for your opponents to interact with. They can't besage you it. They can't force it. They have to like binding or haywire might it.
Right.
Yeah. Not necessarily looking forward to this one being good, because it seems like it will be like if it's
too good, then it's a
annoying.
problem. Yeah.
It is nice that you can needle it. So like a lot of decks do have that answer to it at least.
Yeah, into it. Anything else? Like, I know people seem to have somewhat divided opinions on things like Stern Scolding. I see some narrowed eyes, maybe disagreeing with.
Card's fine.
It's fine. Yeah.
I don't think it's going to be.
I think
like,
it's more of a sideboard card. Sorry for talking over you.
No, you're good. You're good. I was going to say the exact same thing. I think it's more of a sideboard card.
But I mean, so do you think it is a sideboard card? Because like, I think people thought that about Minor Misstep, right? And Minor Misstep is just a little bit too narrow, and this is a little bit. Is it broad enough?
Well, it's not that Minor Misstep is too narrow. It's just that Minor Misstep is not a good card. Minor Misstep is a card that like. Against it, like almost never trades up on mana. You want your counter spells to be able to trade up on mana. You want them to spend 2 or 3 mana. You spend 1 mana.
Right.
With Minor Misstep, it kind of inherently doesn't do that. There are a lot of cards that cost 3, 4 mana even that Minor Misstep counters for 1, which is a really big deal.
My take when we were talking about this in the Dive Down Discord was like, is the time of just a decent creature counter spell over in Modern? Like, is this what Modern is about? Like, countering your opponent's spells? Like, a few decks are running counters, right? But they're like running things like Spell Pierce to have a super efficient way of keeping their combo line open, right? Or to stop people making like 8/8 worth of trampling rhinos because it's just like so hyper efficient. And so Stern Scolding, I get it. Like, it's an efficient counter spell to a good number of creatures in Modern that sometimes do have ETBs, but it's just like, is this enough that a lot of decks are going to run this in the sideboard, or is it just like a very minor sideboard piece that we'll see in a certain type of deck?
Yeah, I mean, I do think it's more of a minor piece for sure. I will say that there is like an attitude that Modern players have that this is just not a format where you can play creatures. Creatures are so bad. Creatures are so much removal. But Modern is mostly creature decks. Modern is mostly creature decks. So it's just like maybe your creature deck has not been able to keep up over the years. But Modern is mostly creature decks, which is kind of funny. I do actually have a fun story about Stern Scolding though, where in development, originally the card said just counter a target creature with power 2 or less. And I suggested changing it to power or toughness, mostly for Luris, because Luris was still legal at the time of consulting. And so like you would want it against Hammer, but it just doesn't counter Luris, which was like such a problem. But it's also really nice that like the 2 toughness counters Solitude and Grief also. And I think that that's kind of a an interesting change.
Yeah, I mean, my take isn't like that the format's not about casting creatures, but more like, do you want to run a creature counterspell in your sideboard? Like, can you go over the top in other ways or stop what your opponent is doing in other ways? And I think some decks can and some decks can't, right? And that's the kind of thing that you'll see him play a spell like this.
I mean, in general, in Modern, you want to play 1 mana counterspells if that 1 mana card is going to consistently trade with 2, 3, and 4 drops. That's why Spell Pierce is so good. They spend 2, 3, 4 mana, you spend 1 mana. Certain Scolding does the same thing. Minor Misstep does that against like exactly Cascade decks, but nowhere else.
Yeah, makes total sense. Anything else on this list, like Forge Anew or Press the Enemy? I mean, people are pretty amped about Orcish Bowmasters, but maybe we've said everything that we're going to say about this. Frodo is kind of an interesting card, I think, potentially. Like, Frodo sort of brings back the hope that we could be, like, using swords again, maybe.
I got something that's not on the list if we potentially want to take a look at that one. I got Aragorn. What do you guys think about? Do you guys know what this one is?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I have Scryfall up, so let's do a little Aragorning.
The non...
Everything
the one green one.
The one that might go on like a Omnath style deck?
Red, green, blue, white, 5/5. Whenever you cast a white spell, you get a 1/1. Blue spell, you scry 2. Red spell, you deal 3 to an opponent. And green spell, you give a thing +4/+4. The fact that I don't know if humans like would ever really want to play a 4-drop, but 1, you can cast it off of Omnath mana, and 2, the human typing means that like if you cast a Mantis Rider, you get a 1/1, you scry 2, and you deal them 3. I don't know if that's like quite good enough for humans, but maybe that makes them play more gold cards. I don't know what you guys thoughts on that.
No, I mean, I think it's interesting for sure. Like, it does a lot, but it's not the kind of deck that I play, like Omnath style decks at least.
Yeah.
My biggest issue with the card is that it's a 4 mana creature that doesn't play defense at all or like very well. If that makes sense. Like, the bar for 4 mana creatures is obviously very high, and if you get to untap with this and like cast an Omnath, or if you're like really ahead, it's very good. But I for me, I think what's great about cards like Yawgmoth and Omnath and like maybe Urza, like the modern defining 4-drops, is that they all stabilize you pretty well and they play defense really well. And I just don't see Aragorn doing that.
That's fair.
Can I get your take on Frodo? That's the 2/2, 1 and a white, and when it ETBs or attacks, you can attach target equipment you control, not named Colossus Hammer, mana value 2 or 3, and as long as it's your turn, prevent all damage that would be dealt to Frodo. Is this a thing, or is this not really a thing in today's Modern?
I mean, I've played a lot of like Fervent Champion plus sword decks over the last couple of years.
Sure
it like actually carried me pretty hard in the trophy race. I think that archetype is underrated and has like an interesting position in the metagame. I would probably play no more than 1 copy of Frodo in that deck, but that's also like the only place I would play it. But it could also be the case that you play this card a little bit, you're a little bit more impressed by it, but for the most part, Fervent Champion is a 1 mana hasty non-legendary Frodo, and obviously there's like a few differences, but I think the like preventing damage on your turn clause is not that relevant, and I think the 1 versus 2 mana is just so big, and the haste also in Fervent Champion is crazy, where you just have your sword sitting in play, and you top deck like Ranger Captain, sack your Ranger Captain so they can't do anything, then play your 1 mana champion, put all your swords on it, hit them, and then just so ahead.
Yeah, I mean, we have cards similar to this, like Core Outfitter, which is almost effectively, for all intents. I mean, it doesn't have the prevent all damage that be dealt to it clause, but 2 mana 2/2 ETB attach an equipment. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think you ever played that card in the Boros Blade decks, right, Spike?
No, I didn't. Like the nice thing is like you can play this on turn 2 and then play the sword and equip it. When you compare it to like the cat or Core Outfitter, like you can't attack with a sword on turn 3, and that's what this card does.
When it attacks, yeah, okay, I gotcha.
Yeah, so, but still, yeah, I agree. It's not a card that I'm particularly excited about.
The real question is, are you the person who did when they gave it to you, or did you look at this one? Did it ever Was it ever able to attach ever able to attach hammer?
As far as I remember, and I've been meaning to, I'm going to do a YouTube video on the topic and go back and look at my notes and look at like how the set used to be and not break my NDA about that, but just kind of like it's
if you can't speak
reference stuff. You know, I can't speak on that though. Like more than half of the cards of the set, I have never seen before, and this is, or like seen the design for. They're completely different. The One Ring is one of those cards. One Ring was completely different, and I believe that this Frodo was completely different as well. It's like completely new to me. Just a little aside, there's like a funny post online asking like, do I play all these food decks, all these Asmo decks, because I knew that Lord of the Rings was going to have all this food stuff. And when I saw Lord of the Rings, I believe there were no cards that could make a food token. Really? I believe that they were. Yeah, I believe that they were all added later. Crazy. I need to go back and double check my notes. But they're at the very least were not this many.
Sure.
You know.
Yeah. So there's so much food in this set.
Yeah.
Didn't see Samwise.
And I think that was likely like whoever they have for like the limited playtesting. I think most of these like food cards are like limited considered cards, you know. Mm-hmm. And then you have like your food sub theme and for that, which I think is exciting.
Well, except for Sam. Do you want to get into Sam?
Sam's new this week, so we could definitely want to talk about Sam in a little bit. But I do want to get your take on Orcish Bowmasters. I feel like it's one of the cards people are most interested in. Maybe not potentially for modern, but I think there's people just saying like, hey, there's a lot of value here. This can do a lot potentially. Are you in agreement, or is it kind of, hey, this is more for legacy, more for CEDH, and it's kind of a role player in modern maybe?
Yeah, that's the camp I'm in. I think that it is not terrible in modern. I think that there's like it's definitely a card you have to cast a few times. I don't know that it's actually like as, you know, mid or like just kind of more of a role player as I think. But I think for the most part, it'll probably see play as like a one of in the main deck as in Yawgmoth, maybe a couple more on the side for like the Mirror and Ragavan decks, although you're already so good against Ragavan. And I don't really see Scam main decking any copies. Could be wrong. Maybe they play a couple copies, but right now I don't think they main deck any copies, and that's like it. I don't really see it going in too many other spots. I would love to be wrong. The card is really cool. The card is definitely really cool. You could maybe play it in like the red black sacrifice deck, but it's I think it is more of a legacy card. The way it really punishes those card draw spells. In modern, you're really like punishing like Ledger Shredder and Mishra's Bauble, and like not too much else.
Yeah, I mean the best card advantage spell in modern is probably Expressive Iteration, right? And that just doesn't do anything against that. So
yeah, exactly. And that card is banned in Legacy, so it's better in Legacy.
Yeah, so no particular different thoughts on that, Devon? Kind of.
No, I think I'm in the same camp. I mean, it's really cool, like, when you get to do the thing, like, maybe there are some situations where, you know, like, if you're playing against, I guess, maybe Blue-White Control, because they have something like Teferi, maybe they have Jace, it's harder for them to remove it, but then, even then, they have Leyline Binding, so it's just like Spike was saying, it seems really hard to find a situation where this really gets you the amount of value that you want it to, especially it being a 1/1, so even if you, like, get a half of a card out of it, and then they just Red and 6 it, is it really even worth it? It's, you know.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's get into it then. Let's talk about some new stuff since last week, and anything that we didn't, you know, any and all things that you all are hyped about or interested in or think that are, you know, viable in modern. I'm just going to start it off with a super boring card. I don't think that that's exciting, and it's Boromir, Warden of the Tower. 2 and a white, 3/3. Boring, exactly. Boring mirror. 2 and a white, 3/3 vigilance, human soldier. Shame that sounds bad. Oh, whenever an opponent casts a spell, if no mana was spent to cast it, counter that spell. And you can also sacrifice Boromir, and creatures you control gain indestructible until end of turn. And the ring tempts you. So the text of the ring tempts you on a potentially playable card, PPC. I don't know. This feels like it comes down a turn too late for most of the matchups. I might want it, but, you know, there's probably, maybe it's doing something. You all tell me. What are you thinking about this card?
So, like, one big issue that Humans has is that you have a lot of really good 3-drops. And you have, like, Adeline is, like, the best by a lot. I don't think Boromir changes that. I do think that Boromir, like, is... I've really liked in the past playing Adeline Ranger Captain in the 3-drop slot. I think that it's maybe a conversation between other 3-drops, maybe a conversation of Ranger Captain versus Boromir. But I do like this card. I think in some ways... It does incentivize you to play a Noble Hierarch build of Humans, so you can play it on turn 2 on the draw, especially post-board. But this kind of like combination Selfless Spirit, Lavinia, I think is very good. Where like one of the biggest problems that Humans has is the Rhinos matchup, where the Rhinos stabilize them very hard, and it's hard to like commit super hard and get blown out by Fury on the first couple turns. And this being a 3-drop doesn't help that so much, but the fact that this is a card that is both good against Cascade and good against Fury is exciting to me. The fact that it can cover both of those bases, I do think is a very big deal. The Ring Tempts You is definitely like some extra gravy on the card. I think that in the first round of like I don't think this card changed very much in development from when I was working on it, but I do think that was added on just to make it a little bit better, and I think that like that maybe is like exactly like that tiny push it needs to become playable in the humans deck. Kind of a hard mechanic to evaluate without playtesting it, but I think that this is a card humans will play.
I feel like you cannot have a Boromir card without the ring tempting you.
Yeah, I agree. Very flavorful too.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat. Like, I think it's maybe a card that you would consider. I don't think you're ever going to main deck this card, but a decent sideboard card. You know, if Blue-Eye Control gets a little bit popular, more people play Supreme Verdict. Yeah, like the fact that Spike mentioned, this makes you want to play Noble Hierarch, which maybe you should be playing anyways because you really want to play this on turn 2 against Cascade. But yeah, I think it's a decent sideboard card. I wouldn't be surprised to see humans play 1 or 2 copies.
Cool. And then I'm just going to tee up another one that I think people have been talking about as like a sleeper hit. I don't feel like a lot of people are really amped about it, but then if the people that are amped about anything, they're amped about Flowering of the White Tree. It's a white legendary enchantment. Legendary creatures you control get +2/+1 and have ward 1. Non-legendary creatures you control get +1/+1. So like this is a reasonable anthem. The +2/+1 and have ward 1 for your legendary creatures. It's like, well, now do I use this as like a build around for like a legendary matters deck? Like, is the floor too low? Like, I don't know. Like, I think this is interesting. It does a lot for potentially a little, but it's like, it doesn't do anything by itself. I don't know what you're doing with this, but it seems like it's doing a lot.
Trying to think of like the mono white deck that people were playing, and this is not necessarily the best card to pair with Shoal, but I feel like that deck, like you have enough legends in mono white where you have Kithian, potentially Skrelv, you have Thalia, you have Adeline. There's maybe a couple others that you can go to that maybe there's enough to kind of get that together, but at the same time, it's like, what are you doing differently than humans? I don't know. I mean, it's like you said, it's got a lot of potential. I'm curious to see what Spike says about it.
Yeah, I mean, I do like the card. It is really powerful. I actually disagree that it's like not a good card to play in Shoal because you have so many pitch spells in Shoal.
Sure.
That like because it's legendary, you get to pitch the extra copies. I think that's kind of fun. I will say that the fact that it is legendary makes it like a little bit awkward of a build around because you can't have 2 in play, but like the Shoal, Solitude, maybe Force of Virtue plan helps with that. I think one very exciting thing about this card is that it obviously is very good with your legends, but it also is a 2-mana anthem for the rest of your team. And like a 2-mana anthem is like historically pretty good, or maybe not in modern, but like across formats a reasonable rate. And I do like that like Esper Sentinel, like your 1-drops in theory are going to be like legendary 1-drops and Esper Sentinel, and then having a 2-power Esper Sentinel is very, very good. And this card does seem specifically very good with Adeline, which helps protect your Adeline, gives it 5 toughness out of Fury range, buffs your Adeline, and then also like buffs the tokens too. I will say that it's a card I like. It's not a card that I love. I think that it is, at the end of the day, it's a hard build around because it's legendary.
Yeah.
And I don't know that it's going to be something that makes a big impact, but it could also end up playing better than I might expect.
Cool. I'll give you all free reign. Evart, you're our newest guest. What card have we not talked about tonight that you are into, that you are interested in messing with or testing or think's going to make a big impact?
I'd like to talk about Flame of Anor a little bit.
Yeah, it's on the list.
I'm in.
Yeah, it's like the Snapcaster Copium finally, so like a real reason to play Snapcaster.
All right, so it's a instant. You get to choose 1, but if you control a wizard as you cast the spell, you may choose 2 instead. The options are target player draws 2 cards, destroy target artifact, or deal 5 damage to target creature. So why do you like this?
Shane's comment.
What's that?
It's like, let's go ahead.
The one that's
Shane's comment.
The one that's on the page says, Shane, this can't possibly be good, right? I bet people sure want it to be.
Yeah, that's my take. I'm interested in your take since you brought it up, Spike.
I guess I'm people. So like one thing very obviously on a surface level evaluating this card, if you always get to choose 2 modes, this card is very, very good. It's like Prismari Command, but deals 5 damage instead of 2, and you draw 2 cards instead of drawing 2, discarding 1. And the Destroy Target Artifact mode is obviously not relevant in every matchup, but is relevant in a lot of matchups.
Yeah.
And is super nice to have
Never a
access
bad
to.
mode.
And obviously this card is like just meant to pair with Snapcaster Mage. Snapcaster is the premier wizard for the kind of deck that would want to play Flame of
I was going to
Anor.
play Viashina Pyromancer.
Yeah, as much as I do love Viashina Pyromancer,
Checking the creature type
One
on
problem
Shardless
is
Agent.
that like a lot of the other creatures you would want to play with this card, Ledger Shredder, Dragrage's Channeler, Ragavan, Murktide, Fable of the Mirror Breaker, none of those are wizards, which is like, means that you're not always going to get to do 2 modes on this. Another issue is like Snapcaster is unfortunately a kind of suboptimal card at this point in time. One kind of funny story is like during development, this was one card that I was a little bit concerned about the power level on, and I suggested changing it to deal potentially 3 or 4 damage instead of 5 to balance like those Snapcaster chains. And I think that like this was like 2 years ago. Snapcaster was a little bit more playable then. I'm happy they didn't nerf the card at this point.
Was it really more playable then?
It was. I mean, it saw more play. Like people still like played a lot of Snapcaster in their control decks like pretty immediately post MH2 or like more than they do now for sure. But I'm hopeful. Like there's a chance that this is the kind of card that like you need another card like Snapcaster Mage for these like flash control decks in Modern, and then boom, this is like a competitive deck. But right now this is a card I'm very excited to try.
So what are you going to do to build around it? Like, are you just really only going to try to do like Snapcaster stuff and that's enough? Like it's enough. The floor is okay, but the ceiling is really high. And then you're just going to like, hopefully get some snap action going or other kind of wizard stuff or.
Yeah, there's not really a lot of other good wizards. Like I don't think I'm reaching for Vendilion Click. There's a chance that you can play it with Asmo, who is a wizard. I think for right now, I'm mostly just going to be playing it in like a Blue-Red, Grixis, Jeskai, Snapcaster control deck.
Going old school, trying some value, some Snapcaster value.
Yeah.
Devon, what are you into? What have we not talked about that you are curious about, or you just not caring about this set right now because you're like, I don't play Modern that much. You have hinted at Samwise a few times.
That's basically the one card that I'm actually interested in playing in out of the entire set. So if you want to talk about Samwise, I'm down.
Yeah. Why don't you read it for us, Devon?
I would love to, Shane. Green-white for a 2/2 legendary creature halfling peasant. Whenever another non-token creature enters the battlefield under your control, create a food token. Sacrifice 3 foods, return target historic card from your graveyard to your hand. Artifacts, legendaries, and sagas are historic. So there is a combo with this card.
Yeah.
There's a combo. Combo involves Cauldron Familiar plus Sack Outlet is infinite. So basically, that is kind of the joke here. Now, a lot of the food decks, at least the ones that have been doing well recently, they're kind of more on the spike shell, which is like Gruul with Asmo, Ren and 6. They're not really going back to black. Like people used to play green-black with Finale and Cauldron Familiar. But now that we have, another reason to play Cauldron Familiar, I definitely could see, a build that is kind of, I guess it would have to be Abzan, because maybe you're just like green-black splashing Sam, and then you go back to Cauldron Familiar, which is Oven, and then you do that kind of stuff with Finale. But I'm curious to see how this kind of plays out, and I'm pretty excited to play it.
Spike, this is your kind of card, right? Maybe?
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely spent a lot of time with food decks over like the last year specifically. I actually think to some extent I'm thinking about this card differently than most people, where I think like kind of what Doom is saying, so many people seem so excited about specifically the Cauldron Familiar combo. And like the fact that this goes infinite with a Sack Out and Cauldron Familiar. That combo is good to have access to. It's nice for sure, but it doesn't do anything like much more special than like Malira Kitchen Fink Sack Outlet or Devoted Druid Vizier. This is like the same kind of like 2 or 3 card creature based combo that's disruptible and fragile. But to me, what's very, very exciting about Sam is kind of like the Archfiend combo in Pioneer, is that Sam is just a very good card in the food deck. Sam is a card that I think you are actively happy to put in your food deck, and you would be happy to play it if Cauldron Familiar didn't exist. But also, Cauldron Familiar is a card that is fine to play in the food shell too. And so the fact that you're playing Cauldron Familiar and Sam, 2 cards that you're just happy to play in these archetypes anyways, and they go infinite with like a Viserys here is very exciting. And so to me, I'm mostly wanting to play like a Finale of Devastation build of Asmo, where you play Cat, you play Oven, you play Sam. Sam is so nice being able to like return your Asmos, give you a lot of foods, return your Urza Sagas. And you play 1 Viserys here, which you can Finale for. And what's very cool about this is that if your Viserys here dies, or you're able to like put it in the graveyard by sacking itself, so they can't even exile it, and then you can get it back from the graveyard with a Finale of Devastation later, and you can dig for Finale of Devastation with like Sandred Sealseeker. You have a lot of card selection, which is kind of cool. That's how I'm planning on building the deck. There's obviously like some deck building decisions still on the 75, like how hard do you go in a Cat Oven? Do you play Ranger Captain? Yeah, more of a value, because it is a value card. So like lean into the value. Yeah. Asmo decks are value decks. Lean into the Asmo. And then one more point about Sam is like Sam and Asmo, these are the only two cards that are both food enablers and food payoffs. Besides hardcasting, feasting, troll king, you're usually Oko's an enabler. Oko is not a payoff for your food tokens, like something that you can use your food tokens for.
Didn't it like it could turn an artifact into an elk or something?
I guess so.
Ostensibly, it was. I think it was intended to be such. That was.
You're right. but at the very least, like a lot of time in the food deck, you have a board of food tokens, and like only Asmo is the only way you can get value from them. But now you have Asmo and Sam, which is I think a really big deal.
No, yeah, the nice thing that I didn't think about with Sam with first is like the initial food decks. I remember I don't think a lot of them had red, and I think I want to say it was Spike to the first person to add Ren for Ren and 6. But Sam just does a really good Ren and 6 impression. You just get your sagas back. It kind of does the same thing where you don't get the fetch lands back, but the fact that you can loop sagas with it is really good.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that point, and I'm super excited to play it. It's definitely like a deck that I'm like seriously considering in my Pro Tour testing, and it would be very cool to Samwise Gamgee some people at the Pro Tour.
Can we talk about Sam's wife, Rosie? Because I still think it's really weird that Dave called this when like we didn't have any cards spoiled at all. He was just like, yeah, Sam's wife Rosie is gonna be like some part of some weird combo, and then she is. So Rosie's 2 and a white for a 1/1. Halfling Peasants, legendary. When she ETBs, you create a food token. Whenever you create a token, you put a 1/1 counter on target creature you control other than Rosie. And talk about easy combos. Isn't Rosie plus Scurry Oak just like a combo? That's it? You just need 2 cards?
Yeah, that sounds like it to me. Coco into both.
Yeah, that's the thing is people are talking about, hey, you can Coco into these. That's kind of like the secret sauce here. Is this a thing?
What was the other combo with
a thing, yeah.
Scurry Oak?
Like a Helio thing or something?
Was it the Denizen?
Yeah. So there was a 4-mana creature from Return to Ravnica, and I only remember because I just have every Return to Ravnica creature burned into my brain. But it's like Tin Street Denizen, or something like that. I'm pretty sure it's a Denizen. But
Ivy League Denizen. That's the one.
Ivy League Denizen. Yeah.
Okay.
But like the fact that it's basically the same card, but 1 mana less.
Yep.
And that's big because you can Coco into both of them and unearth both of them. And I think it's really not too much more complicated than that.
Will it be a thing, though? I mean, that's the thing. It's just like, will this change anything about Modern? Like, is it just another fragile combo, or is it not that fragile? You can just go off. Like, that's the thing. Is it just like we have seen glass cannon decks in the past that fold to interaction, and it's like, hey, this is cute, but it's not doing anything different.
One thing I do like about the combo is you don't have to untap with either of the pieces. It's like something that like it's not like Devoted Druid. You have to untap with one of the creatures, then combo kill. You can just Coco into both, win immediately. But I do think that it is going to have some of those same weaknesses of being a creature combo in a format of premium creature removal.
Yeah, I wonder if there's any, and maybe this is just kind of going back to like the roots, I guess, as it were, but I wonder if there's a way that you can build a Heliod deck that features Rosie plus the Scurry Oak stuff, because like there's kind of some weird synergies, like Rosie makes a food which gains life for Heliod. You have +1/+1 counters, putting counters on Spike Feeder could be important, so maybe there's like you can kind of incorporate those two decks together, and obviously Coco is great with both of those combos, so maybe there's something there, question mark?
I would definitely one I'm excited to try.
Sweet. Let's talk about a card I'm mildly excited to try. I don't know in what. Elven Farsight. Just a green sorcery, scry 3. Then you may reveal the top card of your library. If it's a creature card, draw a card. So what are we doing? Like we have like a green sort of ponder, sort of preordain thing. Maybe it's just better than both of these, right? Clearly.
Is our Ponder and Preordain better than this card? Is that the question?
No, it's not a real question. I'm proposing that Elven Farsight is the best cantrip we now have.
Farsight is way better in Modern than Ponder and Preordain because it's
really
legal.
Good, right?
it's legal in the format, so It is way better. I don't know. I don't know how many more of these cards we have to see before people stop playing them, I guess. It's or like talking about it every single time. It's like we had the one from
anything.
Mom that's like it's an instant surveil 2, put a permanent to your hand.
Seed of
Gain 2, like the card also gains 2 life. And maybe it's like, it gets any permanent, but it's only 2 cards, 3 cards. It's like literally what deck is playing enough creatures and wants a cantrip for this. A cantrip that can't hit lands. Like if it could hit lands or creatures, it would be a slam dunk, but I don't think this like fits anywhere,
Yeah, me talking about it's not the time of creature counter spells. Now I'm saying we need creature selection tools. So in green.
Yeah. I mean, in theory, there is like a level where this card could be good enough, like Scry 5. Like if it was an Ancient Stirrings, then like sign me up. But like at its current level, I can't imagine putting it in any deck. Like the decks that could play it are like Hardened Scales and Elves.
Yeah.
End of list, and I wouldn't play them either spot.
Would you play in Ancients? Like, is there a deck that you would play in Ancient Stirrings that only found creatures? So like green sorcery, top 5, put a creature in hand. Would that be a playable card?
No, I mean I don't think so. Like there's like right now you have, I think, like, don't you have creature or enchantment, and you have enchantment and land, or creature and land for 3 cards. You have enchantment and creature for 4 cards.
Adventurous Impulse.
Adventurous Impulse, and then there's another one that's a creature or enchantment or land top 4. I have played that card actually, but Scry 3 is a good amount better than just put it into your hand. If that
True.
Since like I would play Scry 5, reveal the top card, put a creature into your hand.
Gotcha.
But also Scry 5 probably takes way too long to resolve.
That's a lot of draw fixing.
Yeah, I think so. I think if this card could reveal creatures or lands, it would be modern power level. At the moment, I don't think that it is modern power level. It's also like Oath of Nissa hits creatures or lands for 3 cards.
Yeah, I don't think we're ever going to get better than what's the one not land or
one?
non-land? No, the green land or non-land reveal. What's that?
Oh, Abundant Harvest.
Yeah, Abundant Harvest.
Yeah.
I don't think we're ever going to get better than that one in green. So
Let's just reprint Once Upon a Time.
let's not do that.
No, it's probably for the best. Devin,
Shane.
anything else besides Samwise? It's the only card in all of this that you're interested in, or anything that we're not talking about yet?
I mean, honestly, kind of just Samwise. I'm looking through the set again. I'm trying to find something, but Samwise is really the one that speaks to me the most.
Yeah, for sure.
And I mean, to be honest with you, I've kind of been out of touch with Modern, so I'm not like as much into the swing of things
fair.
as Spike is. But yeah, I'm pretty excited to play with Samwise. The rest of this, we'll see.
Everett, what are we missing? What are we not seeing that you're seeing in this set?
He's not going to tell us for the Pro Tour. He's not, what I mean?
So when is the Pro Tour, and how close is it to the release of Lord of the Rings?
It's the end of July. So there's going to be like 5 weeks until until deck lists are due from the set release. I don't know. It's like I'm looking at the same cards y'all are, and honestly, it's like. This is not Modern Horizons 3.
No, not at all.
It is, like, I think maybe a little bit stronger than the average standard set. But also, standard sets now are like March of the Machine they're like standard sets right now are really crazy. So I don't even know if that's true.
True.
The card pool is fine, but I don't think there is any like big secret card that I see that other people don't see. I think I'm looking at Samwise in a little bit of a different way as like some players are, and I think that the One Ring, the One Ring is that card though. Okay, the One Ring is broken. Sure. I think people have forgotten about it because it was like an early spoiler. The more I think about the One Ring, the more I think that card is crazy. The more I think that this is maybe like one big problem I think that Tron has is that a lot of your cards are mediocre. Like Karn Liberated and Ugin just are not very good cards anymore.
Yeah.
This card seems seems so good in Tron, seems so good in Omnath, seems so good in the combo decks. Like legitimately could be a blue-white control card, although I tend to stay away from like Life Loss cards, Life Loss card advantage balls in control. I'm very excited about this card. I think it's a big deal. And I think it's to some extent, and I'm not saying it's as good as Oko. I do not think it's as good as Oko, but I think it has the Oko effect, where Oko and the One Ring both got spoiled really early before the rest of the cards came out. And whenever cards are spoiled early, people are like, I'll think about this later. Yeah. I'll think about this later. Just like people kind of forget how good they are because they've been around so long and they also haven't played with them.
No, makes sense. Man, I hate to go after Spike saying, yeah, he thinks the One Ring is potentially broken to be like, I do want to mention one more card that I think is interesting. It's Oliphaunt. It's just 5 and a red, creature elephant trample, 6/4. Whenever it attacks another target creature you control, gets +2/+0, gains trample to the end of turn. Shane, that sounds bad. I agree, but it has mountain cycling 1. You discard the card and you get a mountain. So last week, we talked about the Troll of Khazad Doom as a potential living end inclusion because it has swamp cycling 1 and some relevant text. Living end doesn't really play swamps is kind of the issue, right? And but it does play a few steam vents, which have mountain types, right? So
that is true.
This card has trample. It gives another target creature you control more power and has trample. It probably ends the game pretty hyper efficiently and helps you get, fix your mana. It's probably better than the troll that we mentioned last week. So I just wanted to bring this up as I think a potential living end inclusion. It's a pretty good card with very efficient cycling that also kind of gets around one of the potential issues you have with living end, which is your mana, getting the colors, always having 3 lands when you want. I don't know. I think it's pretty decent.
Yeah, I could definitely see living end playing a couple. I'm trying to find the blue one.
Yeah,
there's a land cycler for each color, right?
Yeah, I think they're all kind of interesting. To me, I like the green one because you can get basic forest that lets you cast Violent Outburst through Blood Moon. But to be honest, like every time like a new creature cycler comes out for Living End or another card that goes into Glimpse combo comes out and people are like, what do you think about this in Living End? What do you think about this in Glimpse combo? It's hard for me to get excited because they just don't change very much. You know what I mean?
It's like it's not breaking the deck open.
Yeah, right. Absolutely. And so like I do think that Living End will likely play some copies, and I think one interesting thing is like, does Living End want to play less lands because they have these land cyclers? Is that an interesting dynamic? But yeah, I don't have many thoughts on this.
That's fine.
And I can just a small tangent. Whenever people go, Spike, you can put this in the Glimpse deck, right? This is a new card for the Glimpse deck. I just have a hard time even thinking about it because if you just glimpse into a bunch of stuff, you're going to win, and if you brick on your glimpse, you're going to lose, and it's almost just not any deeper than that,
Right on.
Not changing the structure of the deck that much.
Yeah.
All right. So overall, it doesn't sound like you think this is going to shake up the format in a dramatic way, besides potentially the One Ring. And potentially, some better counter spells with Stern Scolding, potentially some interesting combo options or value options with Samwise. I have, I'm curious if Forge Anew is going to actually do anything. I'm curious if the red spell that's kind of the anti-Forge Anew that we didn't talk about, the Cast into the Fire, I'm curious if that is actually worse for Hammer than Forge Anew is good for it. So I think there's a lot of stuff in play here, but what I'm hearing you all say is like, you're not amped for this set in terms of really shaking things up and dramatically shifting the fairly, static modern landscape.
Yes, I will say that I do think there's a very good chance that Samwise makes food like a tier deck, like higher tier. I mean, I actually genuinely believe that like the food decks are criminally underplayed at the moment. I think both the red-green variants and the time sieve variants are both good decks that have a lot of game in the metagame. I have like put up very consistent results with them just to like not see like many people pick them up elsewise. And I think this, and also think that the Samwise version is going to be the best build of all the food decks, and so like that makes me really excited for that archetype going forward. And I think that you can see food being like a real tier deck, but it's also important to note like no deck is a tier deck unless people play it.
Yeah, good point.
I mean?
Very true.
So I think that wraps up the set. But before I let you both out of here, I do want to give you any kind of time platform on the pod to talk about stuff that you're working on, stuff you're excited about in terms of your content creation, in terms of your streaming, in terms of anything like that. Like Evert, I know that you recently kind of switched from the TCG CFB company over to Cool Stuff Inc. I don't know if you're doing any kind of content creation for them on their website yet or anything like that.
I'm not. No, I love Cool Stuff Inc. They're very, very cool. They're just being like a sponsor and sponsoring the stream, and they're paying for the space on the stream, which I think is awesome.
That's great.
This is kind of something that. And it's not to be too deep or anything, but for a long time, make it as a Magic player in the content creation field is you have a writing contract and you write for a site, and this is a big part of the thing. But I think that article writing has become less and less popular in favor of podcasts and video content and Twitch content.
Yeah,
and I think just supporting that style of content is kind of the way of the future. So I'm like very happy that Cool Stuff Inc. is helping support me there. But yeah, for right now, my brain, I just have Pro Tour brain. I'm going to be doing some brewing like that. I don't like I always do for Lord of the Rings stuff. I'll be doing like my own set review on the YouTube channel. But my main focus is preparing for the Pro Tour and helping my team prepare for the Pro Tour. And so my Twitch and YouTube channel is going to be a bit more refining decks, playing old decks, playing competitive decks, rather than just trying to brew and trying to innovate like it usually is. And then after the Pro Tour, I will be back to good old Aspiring Spike.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the kind of thing that, of course, we will be talking about as it happens and things like that in terms of the preparation. I'm sure people will be linking to your videos and we'll discuss them on the Discord and stuff like that. And, if you're interested and you want to spill any beans, we'd be happy to have you back on in, maybe a month or so when you're in the testing mode, but, not spilling too many of your secrets, but just say, hey, here's the kind of things that we're thinking about, the kind of things that we're working on. And I think it's just cool to talk about process there, right?
Yeah, I think for sure.
Who are you testing with and working with? Is that public or?
Yeah, I'm doing like the CFB Plus team, so it's like Reed and Nassif and Jim Davis, and
I've heard of those people.
Yeah, just like all the greatest of all time, and then me.
Well, I think for Modern, I think people probably want your particular point of view, right? And I think that's that's why I think people like watching you. That's why they like watching Devon, and hopefully why they like listening to us is that I think they want people with potentially interesting points of view or thinking about things in a way that they don't. And Devon, I know that one thing you were mentioning today on your stream was just like you're doing some more collaborative stuff, and that's kind of something that you're working on. Is that something that you have plans for? Doing kind of just collaborative content creation besides with us, of course. I mean,
yeah, absolutely. I really have been trying to get some more collabs, like kind of doing some different types of content. So me and Tandy and myself have kind of launched this new series. It's called The Multiverse of Magic, where we kind of just pick and choose these decks, not necessarily like, sometimes it's going to be cross format, where we kind of just go back and pick an old deck. Basically, we're just picking our favorite decks at this point and kind of just pitting them against each other. And we had a lot of fun last week, and I think we're going to try and keep that a weekly series. And yeah, I mean, I'm trying to find some other content creators to collab with. I know Spike's probably a little bit too busy, but yeah, I really just want to. That's the type of content that I really enjoy watching, and I think that it could be. There's a really good space for that in the Magic community. So I want to. That's kind of my goal right now, is work on that for the next couple months.
Yeah, collaborative stuff is great. That's why we've always liked, working with you two and other people that we've had on the pod. It's just always good to just work with other people who are thinking about the game and having fun. Just sort of, I look at it as giving back to the community, honestly. Like, I know for you two, it's like part of your livelihood, if not your entire livelihood. But like, that's what's so fun about doing the stuff, is just that, hey, if somehow people are enjoying this thing every week and I'm having fun making it, like, man, I'm happy. So I'm glad that both you all are still keeping at it and still hopefully having fun playing the game and getting better and preparing for the Pro Tour if you're aspiring Spike. So thank you for being on. Thanks for coming on again. And Spike, where can people find you on the internet, support your content, watch what you're doing?
Yeah, Aspiring Spike on YouTube, Twitter, Twitch. I'm doing a Marvel Snap stream tomorrow. I'm really excited for. I am, yeah.
I've been playing quite a bit of Snap. I've been actually.
Me too.
I played a lot less now. Like, I was into it from like when it released. Maybe until about 3 months ago, I was playing too much, and like I was I was letting it be more than a casual game, and now I play it as a casual game, and I enjoy it much more. Like, I went from playing like 1,500 games a month to like 250. Do you know what I mean? And like now I just do my quests and have some fun. I upgrade some cards, make them shiny, make them sparkly. And what's funny is last month was the first month I hit infinite. Out of all my playing, the one I have the least amount of games in is the one I actually reached the end goal. So
that's funny.
And Devon, people can always find you where?
Doomwake, D00mwake, Twitch, Twitter, and YouTube.
Awesome. My friends, thanks for being on the podcast again. It's good to have you both on. It was fun to get your points of views that are different than our own. And I mean, honestly, I think actually pretty similar to our own on this stuff, because there's nothing, I think, too wild. But I'm always glad to have my old friends on. So that wraps up this week's show. If you haven't yet, subscribe to the podcast. Get the latest episodes as soon as they come out. And if you use Apple Podcasts, you can leave us some ratings, some reviews over there. If you want to reach out to us, you can tweet us at the Dive Down, all one word, or you can email us, thedivedown@gmail.com. You want to support the show, you can go to our Patreon at patreon.com/thedivedown. You can also check out the store at thedivedown.com/store. Mana Traders coupon code TheDiveDown2023, all one word, for 10% off your first 2 months there. Of course, Barrister and Man, shaving soaps, body soaps, fragrances, all that good stuff. Use code TheDiveDownM23, 15% off your first order there. Nerd Rage Gaming, 8% off your order with Dive 8. Thanks to the bands Nowhere and Spaceblood for letting us use their music. And until next week, get out there and find the one out of one ring and get $2 million.